Welcome to the Fair Housing Insiders. We are so thankful that you joined us. And please remember to subscribe here on our YouTube channel or follow and like us on your favorite social media outlet, which you can find links to in our show notes for even more fair housing news and insights. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fair Housing Insiders, episode 85. Today, we are focusing on risk management, dollars and cents. I'm your host, Jonathan Sarr, and we are joined today with Michael Coughlin. We look forward to your insights on this topic, Michael. Very important one. Looking forward to your takeaway. So, when we're talking about dollars and cents, how does that apply to fair housing training?
Jonathan, always great to be here. I'm really excited to kind of talk about this. So obviously, dollars and cents is a little bit of a play off of that old adage, "Pennywise and Pound Foolish," and that really applies honestly to the area of risk management and fair housing training within that risk management bubble. Um, you know, I see a lot of different sides of this industry. I work with a lot of fair housing attorneys, so you get to kind of do a little behind the scenes work when it comes to some companies' internal compliance audits, reviews, the way the way their operations work. And I just can't tell you how many times clients come to people like us, not just us, but people like us, and they're looking for maybe some training. And the second that they realize that it costs really any money at all, they are just like, oh, that's just another added expense, and I don't want to add expense. Them, like every other business in the planet, is they're there to make a profit, to make sure that they can keep their employees, they can keep their properties, and hopefully people can make money off of the business. But they don't understand the other side of it, is how much it costs to not be in compliance. So those same people, months and months, or sometimes years, a couple of years down the line, end up, talking to a fair housing attorney because of a complaint. And they are so surprised that it's so expensive to handle a complaint. They thought that training should be cheap, and so should, an investigation. That should be just, couple $100, right? And they are literally blown away to find out how much it affects them and their business. So I understand this is very self-serving. I work in the fair housing training industry. I'm telling you how dangerous it is not to train, but it is like every other part of your business. It is a business operation. It is compliance. It is risk management. It is there to protect yourself, your employees, your bottom line. I know it's just coming from the person that happens to be involved in that.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more, Michael. I've been in the training industry for years, and it's a very important topic, being able to invest in your people and the money you're going to save by training them versus dealing with litigation, which is what you're referring to. So
Absolutely.
it's super important, good reminders for our audience to understand both sides of the table. So are fair housing complaints really that common? That's what our audience may want to know. And who's in charge of those investigations?
Well, let me answer the second part first. So, a lot of people probably know of HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They, hand down a lot of the regulations. They oversee a lot of investigations. That's what everybody assumes all the investigations come from. But the truth is that is only the tip of the iceberg. The DOJ also handles these investigations. Also, these can be headed up by state governments. They can also be headed up by fair housing advocacy groups and FIP organizations. Those do a lot of testing, and they go out and they poke and prod and try to find anybody that's not in compliance. And even sometimes private law firms can get involved in these investigations. Very large fair housing suits have been brought from private law firms against major companies spanning, dozens and dozens and dozens of properties across many states. So it's not, just this one organization handling it. If they don't handle the investigation, somebody else will. As to how common complaints are, there's a really big misnomer on that. When it comes to other areas of compliance litigation, you often see a lot of news articles. Like, it kind of makes the news more often. It makes it around social media, you find out about it. So fair housing doesn't. So it doesn't seem common because you feel like you would hear about it a lot more often, as opposed to something like sexual harassment, which everybody is very careful about because they hear the news stories and they hear the horror stories of companies that haven't been in compliance. But believe it or not, in 2021, there were over 31,000 fair housing complaints. So not only is it common, it makes it like whether or not you're going to get a fair housing complaint almost kind of inevitable, which is scary if you were unprepared.
Yeah. Sobering statistics, for sure.
Yeah.
Digible is a marketing and technology company specializing in the multifamily housing industry. We're a motley crew of industry professionals who all share a passion for a common purpose: to transform the apartment marketing industry through creative, data-driven, digital marketing and technology solutions and world-class client support. Contact us today at digible.com.
So how much can a fair housing complaint cost you?
Well, it really, obviously, there's a giant range. I could go into the specifics of individual cases, and they're all very different because each case is handled on a unique basis. But let's kind of get down to brass tacks. Again, I work with a lot of fair housing attorneys. I get to hear a little bit, not all the specifics, but obviously I get to hear kind of a higher level view of some of the cases and things they've involved. And we have encountered cases where between settlements or penalties and lawyers' fees, over $1 million. Again, $1 million for a single fair housing violation or investigation, excuse me. That puts a lot of companies out of business.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you don't have a giant stockpile of cash, that shuts your doors down. And it's really important to remember that everybody that walks through your door, every single employee that is sitting down at their desk, that is going into apartments and working on, that is handling phone calls, that kind of thing, every single one of them could potentially cost you well over $1 million. And that is only talking about the very one-to-one costs. That does not include the fact that employees have to get involved in investigations. There have to be interviews, discovery. Those can cost people tens and tens of hours, like a year. Individual employees could be dozens of employees from one company. So you're talking about hundreds of hours of company time over the year, and they're not able to do the work that you hired them to do. Instead, they're sitting there giving interviews, going over documents, and trying to prevent the suit from getting out of hand. That's lost money too. So, I mean, this just really can shatter your bottom line. And a lot of people just honestly don't know that, and fortunately, until it's too late.
Right. Which is why we're talking about it. There's
exactly.
Yeah, but I'm glad you gave everyone, like, it's just, it can be all over the place. So again, the purpose of this
real
is
nightmare. Yeah.
We want to help you avoid having those costs. So the next question our community is thinking, well, I've got insurance for all of this. That's why I have insurance. Is that going to help?
Well, first of all, I'd love to meet these people that are so confident in insurance policies that they will cover, whatever. I think we've all been at the wrong end of insurance policies before. I'm not saying, again, it is a very important part of doing business. It is risk management 101.
Mm-hmm.
But leaning on it can also be a bad practice in risk management. So insurance policies, first of all, they can, depending on the policy, they can not cover any of it. Like that is absolutely possible depending on the policy. But even the ones that do, you may not like how it goes. For instance, there's a lot of times where you would seek the advice of a fair housing attorney to help defend you in a fair housing investigation. Obviously, that's not cheap. And your insurance policy may not allow to cover those kind of costs. So they'll say, we'll bring in our own attorneys that have contracted with us to handle your case. Well, guess what? Those attorneys probably are not going to have any experience in fair housing law. Like obviously they'll be a lawyer, but they will not probably specialize in fair housing law at all, which means that you're going to get subpar defense. So yeah, sure, I guess you're saving on attorney's fees, but if it ends up hurting your case in the long run, you may end up losing a lot more money than it costs to just spend on the actual right attorneys. So, again, obviously insurance is really important to your business, but do not rely on it to save you in the case of a fair housing investigation.
Yeah. And I've worked with companies over the years too that have highlighted that, and they show that having their people take compliance training has actually saved them on insurance. So I've heard some of those stories too on the other end.
You're right.
That
They can
be of help. So to wrap it up, you really highlighted, Michael, a lot of important statistics. We know the purpose of the show isn't to scare everyone to death. We just want everyone to really understand the scope of what they're facing. So what would you share with our audience? What can they do to avoid the type of costs you've been referencing?
Yeah, you're right. I'm trying not to scare you. I know some of these numbers sound big. So first of all, take a breath. You absolutely can get on the right side of this. And how to avoid the costs. I could say the word training, but that would fall very short of it. And again, I will acknowledge that the fair housing training company telling you to take fair housing training is very self-serving. But the reason I can tell you that is because I've seen both sides of the coin of companies that really practice intense compliance, like year after year, versus companies that don't, and how it hurts them and puts them in a ton of risk. It makes their whole business very liable. So it goes beyond just training. Obviously, that's the first step of it, is instituting some type of training policies and procedures when it comes to fair housing. Usually we talk about new hires within 30 days, but it goes beyond there. Making sure that you have a quality source of training, even if that's not us, that's perfectly fine. You still need to train. That's a quality source of training. And what are your follow-ups on training? Training once is not enough. Plenty of people train once and then they make a fair housing violation in a couple of years, 3 years, 5 years. A lot of knowledge goes through this industry and it can go in one ear and out the other. You need to continuously train. So that means, honestly, it used to be every 2 years, but now because the push investigations, we're saying every year you should be training people. And that's what a lot of the larger firms are moving to. And you need to make sure that your training is somewhat diverse. Don't just necessarily give them the same course every year. Go over some different fair housing topics, mix it up. When there are problem areas, address it with training on those specific topics. Don't just send out a memo once a year. It's, hey, you got to complete this one thing. This really needs to be a top to bottom part of your compliance and risk management procedures. This, again, it's about protecting your employees, protecting your business. We're happy to do this in a lot of other areas, but fair housing is one that's just now catching on with a lot of these larger firms. And they're like, oh my God, I see the costs now. I see how important this is in order to protect our liability in our business. So like I said, take a breath, one day at a time. But really, if you don't have a solid training policies and procedures in your compliance practices, sit down today and start drawing one out.
Very good. Yeah, we appreciate your insights on this, Michael. We know you deal with a lot of customers, a lot of stories. You see a lot in the industry. So
good and bad stories.
Yeah, exactly. So super timely topic. And we appreciate so much all of the FHI clients that we have. Appreciate what you do to support us. So thank you very much. Great topic, dollars and cents, episode 85. Thanks, Michael, for being here today. Thank you to our community for tuning in. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to hear your feedback about today's episode. Do you have a topic that you would like to see discussed in a future episode? Feel free to share that with us. In the show notes, you'll see a link to sign up for our newsletter. This newsletter will keep you up to date with our latest episodes, blogs, and information about our online fair housing courses. Thank you again, and happy training.